All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at a book that has sparked its fair share of conversation and controversy, I think it's fair to say.
Oh, yeah.
David Daida's The Way of the Superior Man.
Yes.
And with this new anniversary edition, it feels like a good time to kind of, crack it open again and see what's in there, what's relevant, what's maybe not so much. For men in particular, I think this book sort of strikes a nerve.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
when you talk about the superior man, I think sometimes, I have to admit, even the title itself can be a little off-putting. It conjures up these images of the alpha male stereotype, very kind of traditionally macho dominating.
Right. Yeah. And it can feel outdated.
Yeah. So I'm curious, having read this book, how would you say Deida defines this concept? What is the superior man for him?
Well, you're right. The title can be a bit misleading because Deida is not promoting some sort of caveman masculinity or anything like that. He's really talking about a man who is deeply in touch with himself first and foremost. So we're talking about emotional awareness. We're talking about living in alignment with your true desires, your core values. And then also, of course, taking responsibility for your life. Being a stand-up guy, basically.
Okay, so it's more about personal evolution than conquering the world or whatever.
Exactly. It's about inner strength and growth.
Okay. Now, one of the things that Deida talks a lot about in the book is this idea of masculine energy.
Right?
And, I've got to be honest, that term has always kind of thrown me a little bit.
I understand.
Because, sometimes it feels like it's used to kind of justify men being emotionally shut down or avoidant,
Yeah.
like, oh, that's just, masculine energy.
But they're not supposed to be sensitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So how does Deida approach this idea of masculine energy? Does he fall into that same kind of trap?
I wouldn't say so, no. In
Mhm.
fact, he sees emotional repression as a real obstacle to becoming a superior man. What he's really getting at with masculine energy is, yes, there are certain qualities, strengths that are traditionally associated with the masculine, focus, purpose, drive, assertiveness.
Okay.
But it's about finding that balance, integrating those strengths with vulnerability.
So it's not an either.
Exactly. He even talks about the masculine being a container for the feminine. So basically, the idea is that a man's strength, his presence, can actually create a safe space for a woman's emotions to flow.
Interesting. Okay. So it's about having those strong boundaries, but also being open and receptive.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we can't talk about the way of the superior man without talking about relationships, right? I mean, that's a big part of why people are drawn to this book. So how does Deida approach that, given what we've been talking about, this emphasis on purpose and personal growth?
Well, he believes that a man who is really living in alignment with his purpose, with his masculine energy, is actually going to be a better partner.
Oh, okay.
Because he'll be more grounded, more present, more capable of really showing up in the relationship.
So it's not about some kind of pickup artist tactics or anything like that.
No, and not at all. He's not about manipulation or game playing.
Right.
It's really about understanding what creates deep attraction, not just, the superficial stuff.
Right.
So, he talks about clear communication, being present with your partner. And again, this idea of vulnerability comes up.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think a lot of guys, myself included, have been taught that vulnerability is a weakness, right?
Right.
But he's saying it's actually essential for intimacy.
Exactly. And it's not about oversharing or being overly emotional. It's about authenticity.
Right.
It's about being real with your partner and letting them see you fully.
Okay. And that's where that strength comes in, right? Being able to hold that space.
Yeah. Exactly. To be that container. He even talks about this practice of imagining you're giving your partner your full attention as if you were pouring energy into them.
Wow.
He calls it practicing full-bodied presence.
Full-bodied presence. I like that.
Being fully there, not just physically, but emotionally, energetically.
Now, this book was originally published back in 1997.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the world has changed a lot since then.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious how this anniversary edition, speaks to some of the challenges that men are facing today. We're living in this hyper-connected, fast-paced world. There's a lot of pressure. The roles of men in relationships are changing, evolving.
Absolutely. And Deida does address that. He talks about the pressure, the information overload, the constant distractions,
Yeah.
and how that can make it really hard to stay grounded, to stay focused on what matters most.
Yeah.
He also acknowledges that men are struggling to find that balance between, work, relationships, and their own personal growth, spiritual growth.
Right.
Right.
Because it can feel like there's just not enough time for everything.
Exactly. And the world often sends the message that success is all about, material wealth and achievement.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like he's saying, the world may have changed, but these core principles of, living with intention, purpose, being present, these are more important than ever.
Exactly. They're timeless.
Okay. But how do we actually put this into practice? I mean, are there any specific takeaways from the book? Things that guys can start doing in their own lives?
Oh, absolutely. He offers a ton of practical advice, a lot of it rooted in specific exercises.
Okay.
For example, he encourages men to explore their shadow selves. So, those parts of ourselves that we tend to hide or deny.
Right.
He suggests, journaling about them, bringing them into the light of awareness. That's powerful stuff. He also has tips for improving communication through something he calls radical honesty.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So basically, expressing yourself authentically and directly, even when it's uncomfortable.
So no more beating around the bush.
Exactly. Get to the heart of the matter. And, he also emphasizes this idea of aligning your actions with your core values.
Okay.
He uses this analogy of a warrior.
Interesting.
A warrior doesn't just wander around aimlessly. They have a mission, a target.
Right.
So what's your target? What are you fighting for in life?
Ooh, okay. I like that. That's a really powerful image. So it's really about bringing all these pieces together, right?
Mhm.
The self-awareness, the purpose, the relationships, and then taking action in the world.
It's an integrated approach.
It's not just about reading a book. It's about actually living these principles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, I got to say, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. And I think there's a lot here for everyone to consider, not just men. So to our listeners out there, I'd love for you to think about this.
Yeah.
If you had to define your version of a superior way of being, what would that include? What qualities, what values would you embody? It's a really powerful question. And, if you're interested in exploring these ideas further, I definitely recommend checking out The Way of the Superior Man. Even if you don't agree with everything Deida says, it's a book that can really challenge you to think differently about masculinity, about purpose, about relationships.
It's a catalyst for growth.
It is. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.
All right.